everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for this DFI Masterclass on using AI for lesson planning. My name is Claire Behrens-Eitel, and I'm the Associate Director of Instructional Design at the Digital Futures Institute. And we have one of our instructional support associates here named Juan Soretti. And Juan is going to be in the Q&A box answering questions and managing all of that stuff. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the Q&A. And if Juan doesn't answer them during the presentation, then we'll get to them at the end. So just a little housekeeping. Like I said, please make sure to put the questions in the Q&A box. And second, the slides and the recording of this presentation will be sent out to everyone that's registered after the workshop. So don't worry about having to remember everything right off the bat. I just want to start with a little disclaimer that the technology that I'm talking about today hasn't been reviewed by Teachers College. So I'm just kind of going over it as a person who uses AI. So just be aware of that. And it's always really important that before you sign up for any technology to make sure to read the terms and conditions and how they use your data and things like that. So today we're going to be talking about AI for lesson planning. I'm going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons for using these tools for lesson planning in your classroom. Then I'm going to review two tools that you can use for lesson planning with AI. And then we'll finish up by having a Q&A session. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons for lesson planning using AI. I feel like as teachers and educators, there's so much time that we spend lesson planning for our students, and any way that we can have an assistant or some way to save some of that time is definitely a pro. So I would say using AI tools. Now, when I say AI tools, I mean things like ChatGPT or Claude. Today, we're going to talk about a tool called Khanmigo. Things like that. So that's what I mean when I say using AI for lesson planning. Those are the tools that I'm talking about. Another pro I would say for using these tools for lesson planning is that it can allow for better differentiation. I know when I was a K-12 teacher, I would spend so much time trying to figure out how can I take this lesson that I've created and make it a little bit different for maybe a student who needs something a little bit more or a student who needs something a little bit less. And how can I do that? And those are things that take teachers so much time. And I feel like a lot of AI tools can really help out with that. Another is that it can enhance creativity. I can't tell you how many times when I was teaching, I would spend hours of my day scouring Pinterest or Teachers Pay Teachers, looking for ways that I can support the lesson that I'm teaching with a really fun project for my students or some sort of art activity for my students. So I think that these tools can really support you in providing ideas for things like that. Another is that it can improve consistency. You can put multiple lessons in and say, how can you make these build on each other if that's not something that you maybe thrive in? I think it can also help you find a good voice when you're trying to put a lesson together or a curriculum or a unit. So those are a few pros, and there's some cons, I will say, more cons, I will say, than pros, but I think you have to think about it as a balance. So some cons of using AI, not only for lesson planning, I will say probably using AI for any sort of work you're doing, is an over-reliance. So if you use it too much, you can pretty much just say, oh, I'm just going to use this instead of trying to do it on my own. So it can, I think, in some cases provide a decrease in creativity, but not always. Next is quality control. I mean, the thing about these tools, any of them, whether it's coming from a trusted source or it's a large language model, you have to really make sure that the quality that it's producing is good and it's your standard, it's pedagogically sound with the way you believe in teaching. So you really have to go through and edit it down, make it your voice, use it just as a template. Um, and going along with that, I'm actually going to skip to the last bullet point that kind of goes along with quality control, and I will say ethical concerns. So some of these tools, I would say probably a good portion of them can have different biases built into them. So that's something that you have to really be aware of. Again, false information, making sure that it's actually true facts that these things are telling you, it's using the standards that you need. So kind of using them in a responsible way, I think can really take off this con, but you have to make sure that you're always aware and constantly looking through what it's giving you. Next is the learning curve or tech issues. So I will say a lot of these tools, there is a pretty good learning curve that goes along with them. Sure, you can go and type something in and it can give you kind of what you want, but you have to really think about prompts that you're going to give these tools. How can I actually get it to where it needs to be? So you're spending a lot of time kind of going back and forth. In tech issues, a lot of these tools, especially the large language models like ChatGPT or Claude, have free versions, but with limitations. So some of them you only get like 30 messages a day, or some of them you get the one of the first models, so it's not the latest model. So those are some tech issues that can come up. Also, if you don't have good internet, or if the system is overloaded, you can't really use it. So those are some things to keep in mind. And then also limited contextual knowledge. I mean, these systems don't know your students like you know your students. These systems don't know the situation that you're teaching in. So they're not living your life with you like a little robot walking around with you. So those are definitely some cons of using these AI tools. So I really was reading this article, Understanding How AI Works, Make It More Effective in Lesson Planning by Mary Beth Hertz on Edutopia. And I really liked this part of it. She said, be critical about whether they're pedagogically sound and match your own pedagogical approach. So as educators, I feel like we all work really hard to have our own pedagogical approach, the way we teach, the way we like to portray information to our students. And again, that goes back to that limited contextual knowledge. These systems don't know that about you. So you have to make sure to use it, I like to say, as a partner rather than replacing your own work, because it doesn't know what your pedagogical approach is. Okay, so moving on from that, so those are some things definitely to keep in mind always when using, I think, any technology. Really, it comes with a lot of pros and a lot of cons to it. But we're going to talk a little bit about tools for lesson planning. So today I'm going to focus on two tools. One of the tools is a large language model, and another tool is Khanmigo, which is an AI lesson planning tool built from Khan Academy, which I think most K-12 educators are pretty well aware of. So first I'm going to talk about Khanmigo. Khanmigo is pretty new. Khan Academy kind of just launched it. Some things that are really great about Khanmigo is that it's free for educators. So if you're an educator, you can sign up for an account for free and use the tools. I also really like Khanmigo because it's specifically created for a K-12 setting. So a lot of the features that it offers are for K-12 educators. And I think that that's really nice because a lot of these other tools are super broad. Sure, you can use them as K-12, but they're not necessarily geared towards that. And lastly, they're built by Khan Academy, which is a really well-known website that is for tutoring students, has a lot of really great resources for students. So you know that they're producing a good product. It's not just some company that you've never heard of before. So Khanmigo has a lot of different resources, and we're going to get into some of them that you can see. This is just a small preview of what they have. So you can use it for lesson planning, which is the feature that we're going to actually talk about today. But you can see you can do exit tickets. It can help you design a class newsletter. things like class newsletters and parent communications are things that I think can be really hard sometimes for certain people. I know when I was a teacher, that was always really hard for me, is what should I say to the parents about what we're doing? And those things take a lot of time. So that is where I think these tools can really be an assistant to you, is helping you to produce that type of thing. Also chunking text. So that is where you really get into that differentiation. Some students read better with breaking down text into more manageable sections. If you're a special ed teacher, they have IEP assistants, so it can help with some of that paperwork. I know some educators I've talked to, that's a really big reason that they use AI, is helping them with some of those. So let's try out Khan Academy. The first thing that we want to do actually is to change our settings so that they're for our state. So that means that when you go to do a lesson plan, it will pull from your state standards. And then we're going to get started with testing it out. So I'm going to show you how to change those settings. So first of all, I've signed up for a free account. You can do so on your own just by going to khanacademy.org. And then you'll get your dashboard here. So I think it's super fun to just kind of jump right in. But the first thing I'm going to do is come up here to my account, and I'm going to go to the settings. And I'm going to, in my settings, you can see my username and my nickname, all that. And now you're going to select what your primary language is. So you can see they have a lot of different languages here, which is really great. Mine is English. And then you're going to select your state. So I'm in New York State. Hopefully we have some educators from other states here. That'd be cool. So I'm going to save those changes. Okay, so now it's saved those changes. So I'm going to go back to my Khanmigo account. And like I said, you can see all of these different options. That picture that I had on my slide was just a few of them, but you can do report card comments, real world context generator, rubric generator. I know rubrics are always really tricky sometimes to create, so those are always really handy. But today we're going to focus mostly on the lesson plan creator. So I'm going to do a lesson plan today about the solar system. So in Khanmigo, you describe the topic that you're looking for. So I'm going to say solar system, and it will come up with a lot of different ones. So it'll say middle school Earth and space science, and you can see the different standards there. Or you can provide your own context. So when I click provide my own context, you can copy paste the standards in that you're looking to meet. So maybe when you're sitting down to lesson plan, you have a couple of standards in your lesson plan book that you need to meet. So you're going to copy paste those in. And then you're going to give it some notes. So maybe you've already talked to your students about the sun and Mars, and you're looking for a lesson plan about Jupiter specifically. So you can put those notes in as well. So I'm actually going to just go back, and I'm going to just use one of Khan Academy's solar system. So understanding the solar system. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to say create lesson plan. So you can see here that it's creating my lesson plan for me. It comes up with a learning objective, some of the standards that it says that this lesson plan can meet. It gives me a warm-up activity, which we always love. I feel like the warm-up activities are also another one of those things that are kind of hard to think about sometimes. How can I come up with one of those warm-up activities? And then it's going to talk about your direct instruction. So a lot of this, I will say, from my experience of teaching 5th grade, you get a lot of this from the textbook that you're using, the direct instruction. So if I were to use this tool when I was teaching, I probably would mostly take from it the warm-up activities and maybe the extension activity or creative activity. The other really great thing about this tool is that it links to Khan Academy resources that it has. So here it has a Khan Academy video that you can play for your students about the solar system, and then an article. So you can click out and view those as well. And then I can look at the video here. So that's a really great feature that it includes those for you there. Another really great thing about this is if you can see this little purple bar here, I can actually edit this. So maybe this isn't something that I'm going to be using in my lesson plan, so I can always take it out and delete it and add something else in. If I highlight this, I can ask Khanmigo, so I can say, make changes to this. Maybe let's try something different. Or when you click on discuss this, you can give it, you can say, can you put, maybe can you create one more question about this same topic? And it will kind of go back and forth with you. So here's another question. How would the solar system be different if gravity didn't exist? So you can use it also as you would kind of a large language model as well. So you can kind of go back and forth with the lesson itself. So it's a really great resource, and you can save it to your documents. You can export it as a PDF or a Word document. You can print it. You can also share it with others. So maybe if you're working on this with one of your co-teachers, you can share this with them as well. And then it will save it. So inside of Khanmigo, you have your own document center, so you can see it there. If you ever want to kind of come back to it at a different time, you can do that as well. So that's Khanmigo. It's a great resource. Like I said, it's free for educators right now. So definitely I would take a look at that and utilize it as one of our tools. So we're going to keep going. The second tool that I'm going to talk about is a large language model for lesson planning. So this is a little bit of a different situation than Khanmigo, because the large language models, as you all know, are kind of fed from different resources, and they can be used for a lot of different things. You also have to really understand the prompt writing aspect of this. Well, not really. I mean, you can just use them without prompt writing. Honestly, I'm not super great at prompts. So sometimes I just go in and ask it for what I need, which causes a lot of back and forth, and I'm fine with that. But if you're in a time crunch, then that can be a little tricky. I have this really great cheat sheet. This is for a website called AI for Education. They have a great number of resources. I'm actually going to show you some of their resources in just a little bit here. But this cheat sheet talks about all of the different large language models and their key features, what they're best for, what their limitations are, and then the cost. Obviously, like I said before, these all have free plans. I usually just use the free plan because I don't use them enough to kind of reach that limit. But if you're someone who is like, I use this a lot for lesson planning, then you might want to think about paying for a monthly subscription. So the large language model that I'm going to focus on is Claude. I really like Claude. I've always used it. And one of the reasons that I really like it is that their main focus is on ethics and safety, creating a good large language model. Not that these others aren't good, but they don't really pull a lot of information from chats that are being used and things like that. I also really like Claude because I'm actually going to switch to this slide because it tells why I like it. They actually give away their most advanced model for their free version, which I think can really take away from a lot of those barriers of equity. Because that is another con, if you think about these large language models, is equity. So can my students actually access this? Can I access this in a way that I'm getting kind of the best situation that they have, which Claude does do that. While like I said, they do have limitations. So they have a usage limitation of 30 messages a day on the free plan, which if you, like I said, if you feel like you're going to use more, then you might want to think about doing that. But really with these large language models, I found is that you kind of have to find what you think is best for yourself. Like I said, I like Claude. Again, it has a natural writing voice. And it also uses something called constitutional AI guardrails that guides its behavior, meaning it doesn't use user chats to train its model like ChatGPT does by default. So I like to think it's a little bit better, especially for the education setting. So that's the tool that I'm going to use today. So with Claude, obviously its uses are great, but when you get to just the lesson planning portion of it, you can use it for lesson planning, ideas for projects to integrate into your lesson. With Claude, you can actually upload documents. So if you have a lesson created already and you're maybe looking to have some sort of interactive activity ideas, you can upload that document into Claude and ask it to help you to revise it or to revise it using more interactive elements. You can create icebreakers for your class. You can also, and I think that this is such a really interesting use case for a large language model, is to create a curriculum or a lesson overview for parents. I think that that's also a pretty big barrier for a lot of at-home work with students is parents maybe feeling overwhelmed or saying, I don't know how to do this math problem, or I don't understand what this is trying to tell me. So you can create lesson overviews for parents, or parents can use it themselves and say, hey, can you help me understand this? So then they can help their student. So let's try it out. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So here's Claude. I'm actually using the free plan myself right now. So sometimes when the system is overloaded, which I think it is right now, so this is another con, like I said, with technology, is sometimes these systems get overloaded. So I'm not actually using their most recent version, which is the Sonnet, because when I was, of course, logging in today to do this webinar, it said, oh, the system's overloaded. So that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same lesson plan that I did for Khan Academy, which is, can you create a lesson plan for a 5th grade classroom about understanding the solar system? And I'm going to say, please use the New York State standards to create this lesson plan. So that's the prompt that I'm going to use. I'm actually going to show you in just a little bit a prompt library that has some really great prompts for lesson planning. But let's take a look at this right now. So in Claude, it has the document here. It kind of gives you a little summary, and then it says click to open the document, and you can see the document over here. You can download this document as a file. But let's take a look. So unlike the Khan Academy lesson plan that it created, it started with the objectives and the standards and the learning activities. This one's going to go straight into the New York State standards. So again, with any of these AI tools, Khanmigo, Claude, ChatGPT, any of those, you want to obviously make sure that these standards are actually what the lesson is. So you want to make sure that it's correct and all that good stuff. Then it goes into the lesson objectives, what kind of materials you're going to need. And then it talks about my engaging activity. So my icebreaker activity and explore activity, it gives different time frames for each and evaluation. It also gives you a list of extension activities as well. So if I said to myself, wow, this is such a great lesson, I'm going to use it, but I want to create a overview guide to send to parents about this lesson, I can say, can you create an overview guide for me to send home to my students' parents about this lesson? Now, with this prompt, you could also say to it, I also want you to include instructions for parents about how they can help their students with the homework, or strategies for helping your student understand this topic or something like that. But if you look at this, here's the parent guide. It's in a different document than the lesson plan itself, which is nice, so you can download it as well. So you can see here that it's addressing the parents, it's giving the parents what the learning objectives are, what the key activities are, what the discussion topics you'll be discovering are, and then different resources for families. So obviously you would read through this and change what you feel like isn't something you want your students or the parents to be doing, but you could also use this as an outline for future communications to parents. So you can say, okay, well, for my other lessons, I'm going to send home what the learning objectives are, what the activities are that we're doing, the discussion topics, the resources. So you can say, oh, I'm going to use this as a template and do it with your other lessons. You can also come in and you can see here with Claude, there's the little paper clip here. You can upload another lesson and say, can you create a parent guide for this lesson that I've created? So I think it's a really great way to take what you have and reconfigure it, share with parents what you're doing in a great digestible way. So these are just two examples of how you can use Claude. Really, these large language models, you can use them in so many different ways, and it just is a lot of kind of trying out. So that's where it gets to this lesson planning prompt library. With large language models, prompts are kind of really the key to using them. And this AI for Education website is so fantastic. I can't say enough about it. I use it all the time, especially when I'm doing sessions with educators, and their website uses Claude the most. So a lot of their prompts are kind of geared towards Claude, which I also really like as someone who likes Claude. So you can see in their prompt library, lesson planning for students, communications, assessment, things like that. So when I click on lesson planning, it takes me to lots of different prompts. So what if I want to do a social justice standard? What if I want to do something about leveled texts? Just so much stuff in here. So this is really something Thanksgiving activities. So you can really just kind of look through this, and they're always adding more. I will say this website is always doing a lot of webinars as well. So that's another great resource. But if you're someone who says, I really struggle with prompts as a K-12 teacher, this website is great. I'll send this out, especially like I said, after the webinar, along with some other resources. So there's that prompts generator library. Also, there's a YouTube series called Practical AI for Teachers and Students. That's really great. It has a lot of really great strategies of how you can use AI. And then Edutopia has a great AI library of resources and articles about ChatGPT and generative AI for K-12 educators. Lastly, I just want to put a QR code here. My team runs a group called Teachers Supporting Teachers, where we do events for educators. We have another one coming up in December, and then we have some spring events coming up. So if you are interested in joining the mailing list for that, this QR code will take you right there. We only use the mailing list to send out educator events that we're doing at DFI and around Teachers College. So don't worry, I'm not going to send you a bunch of random stuff. So if you want to sign up for that, that's there. I will send it out after the webinar as well. But thank you so much for coming. I know that it's a lot of information at once, but that's the nice thing about these masterclass webinars, is that they're short and sweet and digestible.